Hello, and welcome to part 3 of us creating this player controller for our game that we're going to be creating. And this is a first-person controller, and so far we've got it so that the player can move around, the camera can look around using the mouse or the joystick, and now we want to be able to get so that we can jump on top of things. So to do that, you got to remember that we can't just access the rigid body component or the physics engine and add force to this thing. We actually have to program it to do that at this point now. So we're going to apply a couple of physics calculations to this to get it to move realistically. So let's open back up the player controller script. We're going to add this all to this script here. And we're going to need a couple of variables. We're going to need a variable for gravity. So we'll make this public so that we can edit it inside of the editor. And this is going to be a float, and we'll call it gravity. We'll also give this a default value as a starting point of 9.8 meters per second, which is the calculation for gravity. By the way, the physics engine in Unity, well actually units in Unity are all defined as meters. So if you use the metric system to define certain data like length, width, height, physics forces, it should be fairly accurate to what it is that you're working with. And gravity doesn't go up, it goes down, so this is going to be negative 9.8. Alright, next thing we're going to want is a maximum jump height. So this is also going to be a public value, and this is going to be a float as well. And we'll call this jump height. And we're going to set this equal to 5.0f. Alright, so we've got a jump height set up. We're also going to have a private vector 3. And this is going to be our velocity. And what we'll do for this is we'll set this in our data below. And I think that's all we're going to need for now. We're going to have to do a ground check at some point to make sure that we're grounded so that we can't keep jumping over and over again. We might as well set that up now. So let's do that. Let's create a public transform. And the public transform is going to be called GC, short for ground check. And we're going to have a public float for ground distance. We're also going to have a public layer mask. Now, layer mask, what that allows you to do is place objects on a specific layer, and you can either include or exclude them from your test. So like if I want to check to see if it's the ground, I can put something on the ground layer, and if it's the ground layer, it'll trigger something. And that's what we're basically going to use it for here. So we'll call this ground mask. And we're going to need a boolean here, and this boolean is going to be is grounded. Alright, so we have the boolean set up. I guess the first thing we can do is make this guy jump, right? So at the bottom of our update function here, I'm going to create an if condition, and I'm going to check to see if input get key down, or get button down, get button down, input.get button down, and this is another built-in axis called jump. So if input.getButtonDown is jump, what we will do is take our velocity dot y and set it equal to this math function here, which is the math f dot squirt, which is for square root. Whoops, and I totally screwed that up. So math dot square root, and we're going to take our jump height. We're going to multiply that by 2.0f, and I put 8 instead of the asterisk. Multiply by 2.0f, so multiply by 2, and then multiply that by gravity. So basically that's going to give us some force, upward force, and then we're just going to counteract it by gravity to get us some sort of realistic jump. And I got to do it by -2 also. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to apply velocity to this at a constant rate. So we're going to set velocity y equal to, plus equals, we're going to add to this gravity, and we're going to multiply gravity by time.deltatime. And we're actually going to have to do this by time squared. So we're going to grab our player controller.move again. And then move this guy based off of that calculation that we just made. This is very similar to like the game prototyping stuff that you guys have done in other classes. So we'll take this and we'll multiply velocity times time.deltatime here to get this value. Alright, so this should do it. Now we haven't implemented our ground check yet, so technically we're going to be able to fly. So let's save this and let's head back to Unity. All the variables should be there, no errors. And if I hit space, I can actually double jump at the moment. Boop, triple jump, quadruple jump. So what we want to do now is make it so that the jump can't be implemented unless we touch the ground. And to do that, we're going to use a check sphere, which is a pretty interesting type of game object. So I'm going to select the player CC here, and that's going to be our actual GC, which is our ground check. And I'm going to create a new empty game object inside of this, which I don't think I added it in it. I don't want it in the camera. There we go. And I'm going to call this ground check. And I'm going to take ground check and make sure it's in the middle here. And then I'm going to move them down. So it should be like -1. I'll do -1.01. So it's just below it. Alright. So this point, we're going to put basically an invisible sphere that's going to check to see if we're on the ground. Now the last thing we need to do is make sure we set up that layer mask. So we need to put the ground here, our ground plane, on a layer here. If you want, you can rename plane ground. And then you see where it says layer here? Click on the button that says default and go down to add layer. And on user layer 8, we'll create ground. make sure you hit enter. Now go back to the ground plane, and we're going to put it on that ground layer. Okay. And if you go back to player CC, what the ground mask data does is it actually puts all of the different layers here, and we can set it to ground, that we're looking for ground right inside of our player controller script. So ground distance and the ground check. The ground check we're going to want to grab in here. And I believe the ground distance, I'm going to set this to like 0.4. 0.4. Alright, so we have all of that set up. Let's go back and program that ground check. So I'm going to open Visual Studio back up. And what we're going to do is right at the top of the update function, we're going to start writing our code here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check that is grounded variable. So I'm going to type in is grounded. And I'm going to set this equal to a physics dot check sphere. Open and close parentheses. Now inside of check sphere, we're going to pass it a couple of different values. So the first one is going to be our GC, which is the object that we created, dot position. The next detail is going to be the ground distance. And the last value is going to be the ground mask. So it's going to check if that's true. If its position, its ground distance, and ground mask is colliding with this, it's going to return true. If not, we're in the air, and it's going to be false when that update takes place. So what we're going to do here is check in a condition. If our player is grounded and velocity dot y is less than 0, then what's going to happen here is we're going to set velocity to be a negative value to keep our player on the ground. So velocity dot y is going to be equal to -2. So let's see, -2f. Alright, so the last thing we need to do is in our jump statement, check to see if we're grounded. So here we're going to say ampersand is grounded, is true, then we can jump. If not, you're not going to be able to jump. And I think that's it. So let's save it. Let's head back into the editor and let's check this out. And if I double it up, I no longer double jump. I have to land back on the ground, and I can move around. I can jump in midair and move. Now some of those features you may or may not want to have, so like you should go back and kind of tweak this character controller. Should be able to jump on top of that box. Let's see. And I did. Okay. So you know, this isn't the perfect end-all be-all player controller. This is the most basic player controller. So from here, what you're going to want to do is tweak these values, the equations, the movement of the camera to get the kind of feeling that you want out of your player controller from here. But this is a good starting point to get you to where you want to be within your game. And if I hit maximize on play, hit the play mode, we should see that our player moves all the way around this thing. I'm looking completely down now. Move it towards the camera. Alright, so things seem to be working out pretty well. In the next set of videos, we're going to look at how we can create or rapidly prototype some play space to start testing out our player controller. So stay tuned for the next one.